Hey,
Hey, good to see you.
how are you?
Doing good.
No, all right.
I just had to work on some issues here with something else that I was gonna talk to the UX team about because it wasn't not something I was in love with visually, but I think I got it figured out.
Cool. Awesome. All right. SCIM.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that we're talking about this from the bigger perspective of the unified token, but specifically from this issue, this one that I linked seems like a small issue, so I'll link it just for our recording, or I'll share the screen real quick. Um, so the proposal of bringing the UI to the admin screen does not seem unreasonable or uncomplicated. But I don't have a way to test this, and I've been trying to get this set up on my local environment for a long time. Cynthia had suggested that Hannah request for our own sort of test environment for these sorts of things, like any sort of feature that needs an external resource to enable or to activate, so such as SAML or anything else like that, connecting Azure to our services for authentication purposes or whatnot. So I don't know if you have any insight on that or any way you could do that for the team. But for me specifically, in order to kind of work on some of this stuff, I've been having problems because I don't have access to that and I haven't been able to successfully get those systems up and running. And that extends to the token, the unified token, and some of the other things that we've been talking about for, roadmap planning. So I was wondering if you had some thoughts on that and any idea on specifically this issue, how to proceed, and then just more broadly our kind of test server we can create.
So more broadly, and this has been on my radar, I just haven't had a chance to push it through. I started collecting a list from the team on all the integrations that we typically don't have on staging, for example, that doesn't allow us to test features or, for example, in this case, design correctly. And some of them might be easier to do than harder to do, but at least let's start with the list and we can start chasing down who do we need to help us to do that. So let me find that issue and I'll flip to you.
Yeah, no problem.
So I think it makes sense to add these items there, and then we can follow up on how to add each one of them. Now, that's probably not going to help us at least today or tomorrow, like not in immediate term. List of staging integrations. All right, I will flip this to you right after our conversation.
Yeah, no problem.
For SCIM, so I don't know if I am familiar with where to go to enable that, but my thought from a unified token perspective was that at least for an MVC, we'd allow it as basically just a form like RT proposed. And then when we come back to unified tokens, we will come and reconsolidate these into like a generic, like, hey, check which type of token you want, hit generate, and then you get the same token. Does that work, or do you see issues with that?
No, that's kind of what I was just understanding broadly from our dialogues throughout our issues and everything. And that's kind of why I wanted to have this sync, because we haven't really spoken about tokens specifically in a while. And then more so, I guess in terms of this MVC, I was just making sure that I was thinking about this, sensibly, that it's just, let's just bring the feature into the admin screen at the top group or whichever access point it needs to be given for users. That doesn't seem unreasonable. Beyond that, that's kind of where I was thinking these other broader issues, we can start thinking about how we want to solve them with standing up this staging server with these additional features or whatnot in the future. But right now I didn't have any sort of restriction or limitation apart from not being able to see or create this screen, this interaction flow that Cynthia has created for us, or at least in terms of presenting the visuals for it. And so in order for me to feel confident that I'm creating the best integration or the best location for it to exist, I want to see what the screens look like in process from start to finish. And that's kind of where the reason for that, the staging server discussion came about. I don't think it'll hold up this issue because it's just turning on the screen in the self-managed environment, which I don't think that's a problem from where it exists currently. I think we just have the devs enable that, and that's the end of that. But for my work as I go forward with other aspects of this progress or this process, I want to make sure that I'm doing the whole, start to finish flow for it.
That makes sense. So question, so 3 parts to that. First, I saw Cynthia said, I suggest Hannah to create a test beta group specifically for Auth members. And we can, so have we asked Hannah if she had a chance to do that? If not, we can chase that one down. And that's like a action item for today, I guess. The second one is tokens and the ability to see the flow and consolidate them. That epic, I think we need to start pushing forward again. We're just getting a bit slow in terms of wrapping up custom roles and things that have come up. But service accounts and token unifications, we probably need to do some. This is probably because I wasn't here early, but is there like any discovery we've done on that front?
So say that again, discovery on
unified token. So I know from an
unified
engineering
token. So
there's a few epics that we did as Spike. From a design front, if you could get unified tokens, how would that look like? Where would they exist? Is there any research or discovery you've done on that
just
side?
from the previous issue, I don't know if you've seen them or not, but where the idea was to aggregate the token creation across all of our tokens. So what does it look like for each process for each token? And then find the, I guess, the unified features or flow for that. But roughly speaking, what it comes down to basically is give the token a title, define the token type, define the token parameters, and then create. So that part of the flow should be rather, quote unquote, easily enough to execute. But it's those token type and token parameters screen that I'm concerned about, because I don't know if there's any sort of weird contradictory behaviors in implementing that in the front end or connecting that to the back end on how that throws that data into the system. I'm not assuming so, but that's something we don't really have a process set up for, because we have different sorts of screens for different tokens, right? It's not a unified process for the time being. But if we're going to be able to merge that process at some point in time, I think a big discussion from the back end will come up. How does this process look from a unified stream, start to finish on the back end, with these type and parameters on and off based off of that, right?
Yeah, and that was my third part is like, I think the things we need to identify there are basically from a hierarchical manner, where do you create those tokens, who's allowed to, and when we say unified tokens, do they still stay at the same place, or how do we limit access to people who can get there? Because, for example, project tokens, right? Almost everyone can create them. So how does that work? When do we plop that on admin screen? And then can anyone get to admin screen and see them then?
Right. So that was another question maybe that I think, at least in terms of the way that it should work for, I guess, a project token or access token, in contrast to a user access token for personal stuff, that's where I think there's going to be presentation or differences or inconsistencies, where from a user perspective, I just need an access token to get into my project and do some work and stuff. But from an admin perspective, I need a bot to go have access to this particular resource and do whatever process it does as a bot. And that, I think, will have different locations. So I'm curious if we can just use the same flow or the same system for different use cases in different access areas. So as an individual user, I still have access to the unified token creation screen, but the options I'm presented with are limited. From an admin perspective, I'm going to be presented the same token creation screen, but in a different admin screen, and then define the token I want based off of the need that I have and the particular location that I have. So that's another parameter, what the location is that it's being done. So if that's a logical process, I need to validate first. My initial assumptions are yes, because that still maintains the current flow that users exist or experience with currently. But again, like I said, that's not been validated.
Okay, and I'm on board doing that because we kind of know that works, at least on some level. But I'm also open to saying, hey, what if we didn't have all of these flows, right? Like the fact that people have to ask 6 questions a day on how tokens work probably means we can start fresh here. But that's more design decision than implementation. Okay, so we'll just so that we make sure you're unblocked. Would you have enough information today to propose a design for the SCIM tokens for the work that's in flight?
Yeah, so that's my first assumption was based off of what Cynthia had linked us, is that we already have that process. It just simply doesn't exist in the admin area, and the visuals required would just be the same that already exist in the SaaS environment, bringing them over to the admin area. And in that, I'm going to say it's going to just be at the top group level.
Okay, cool. So let's do that. I'll share with you the list of things we need, and then we can start aggressively actioning them. It just fell down on the list of to-dos. 3, I'll reach out to one of the senior engineers, because I think it'll help to do the same thing we did with custom roles, where having someone drive this with you, at least on a design phase. So probably Imre, I'll talk to him tomorrow. And then the actual implementation can get spread out amongst the team. But I think you'd need a collaborator to say, hey, I did need an inventory of all the tokens and where they're created. And I need a way to get to them in the UI flow, even if it's on your local environment. And I think that might be the first part, and that will get us to a framework, kind of like custom roles on, okay, we've consolidated 2 out of 3 or 4 or 5 token types that we have.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I've also added a point to bring up with Hannah about the staging server, just to follow up with that on our one-on-ones. I'm seeing her today.
Cool. All right. I think that should work. Do we want to set like a rough timeline or checkpoints just so that we keep making progress on this one? I'll chat with Imre today, and then we can feel free to loop in Hannah on when do we want to schedule the spikes for unified tokens. And through that work, I think part of that would be, okay, make sure Ganit is set up with accessing all of the token types we have today.
I'm just writing that down on my agenda so I don't forget. Yeah, so in terms of a timeline, like I said, the SCIM token we're talking about, that one, I don't think it's problematic. I think I can get that one done in a milestone based off of the issue we linked. The further work, I think that's going to come into roadmap planning that Hannah and I have scheduled. I think she might have invited you to that. If not, I'll talk with her about getting you involved with that, just in terms of the planning for the whole long term. And I think we can put unified token in there somewhere with the rest of the work against, the RBAC stuff that's being kind of prioritized right now, I think.
Makes sense. Yeah, because I think there's at least the what I'll call discovery or spike work, where let's figure out what we want to do, even if the actual execution of the work takes longer. But we should be able to create the laundry list of tokens we have, where they exist, and have you being able to explore through them.
Yep, that makes sense.
Cool, perfect.
Cool, I think it was it for me. Thanks for that. I don't know if you had anything from me that you needed.
No, I think that's it. The SCIM work is scheduled for 57. I, in my infinite wisdom, decided not to check that it had designs on it or not, but we scheduled it. So if we get them, then great. If not, we'll at least have the API work done. But fingers crossed, maybe we squeeze in the UI.
Well, that's what I was saying. I think this one shouldn't be a problem anyways, because there isn't any sort of real design work apart from just bringing the already existing UI to the admin screen. And I think as long as I have a visual of that, I'll just make up a copy.
Cool, that works.
Yep. Cool.
All right, that's everything I had.
Well, cool. Thanks. Thanks for joining. It's a good meeting, and we'll speak with you, I guess, next time.
All right, sounds good. Take care.
Take it easy. Bye.